Going to move on to our next presenter. The topic is using data to uncover trends and foster an open and authentic learning environment. This session is going to be delivered by Anthony Costa, who is the Dean of Students, Teacher, Health and Physical Education, Greenwood College Schools. A bit about Anthony. Anthony has been with Greenwood College School for over 16 years. In his role as Dean of Students, Anthony oversees student support, creation and implementation of action plans, student support agreements, academic contracts, and behavior support plans with accountability towards individual education plans. An integral part of what Anthony does is understanding the students, their experiences, and the impact of different factors on the learning environment at the school. Let's listen to Anthony describe how he and the leadership team at Greenwood are using the Our School data to delve into diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're going to hear about the processes and steps they've taken to drive a continuous culture of growth, understanding, and school improvement. Please welcome Anthony.
Thank you very much, everyone. Is this volume? People can hear me okay? Yeah. I wanted to thank everyone involved with setting up this event first. I know it's no small feat to bring this number of people together from such a vast geographical region, so thank you, and thank you for the introduction. I very much appreciate it. I wanted to lead with a bit of vulnerability here, so I was a bit mortified to learn that I'd shared the draft version of my slides. So if you do see some typos, that's what's gone on there. So I hope it doesn't distract from the message is what I'm saying here. So in essence, I have access to this. Your slides will look very different than mine. Mine have got some notes all over them, but essentially, for what we're looking at today, we're all people who value data and value feedback, and it helps drive our actions forward. And as I said to a couple of people following Dr. Williams, you've set me up very well here, and very tough act to follow, so thank you for that. But in essence, what we're talking about here, when we do get that feedback, I've put it on the screen here, like so what, right? What are we doing with it? What's next? And another way to frame that for me, and something that I think about quite often with the people I work with, is what is our vision? What is it that we want to be doing? Where are we going? And what's that ideal place we want to get to? So if we think about that vision, and I challenge you now to think about your own vision and whatever work it is you're doing, think about that, and then think about the reality. So when I think about the vision of where we want to go, I'll talk about this a little bit down the road here, but in essence, to this particular indicator, we're looking at creating culturally competent individuals who graduate from Greenwood, and they go out into the world and they have a set of skills that they're able to be empathetic and work with people of a varying range of experiences and appreciate. When I think about the reality, we're not there yet, right? And somewhere between those two are the gaps, and we love gaps. Gaps are where we grow, and that's what this feedback does for us. It points out those gaps, right? So it offers this opportunity to delve in a little bit deeper, and I hope today I can show you one example of a way that we've engaged with the feedback from the Our School survey. As indicated earlier, I've been at Greenwood for quite a number of years. I am not a data expert, and what I'm presenting here is just one way to engage with the feedback. It is not the way, right? And I have to acknowledge as well, I'm only one person in this process. There's a lot of really great colleagues who I get to work with. We have an entire team of advisors who we lean on heavily to help with this process. And then I am going to name our Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Outreach, Rachel Brownell-Swain. So I want to name her here as someone who is a great contributor to this work, this very important work. So it's interesting. It's always interesting to me, before I go further, apologies, I shuffle with my papers too, but I always think, when I'm preparing to get ready for any sort of presentation with adults, it's funny, we teach all the time, and those nerves don't necessarily exist, and I've thought about why this might be. I go, well, usually when I'm teaching, I can't really guarantee that more than 50% of the kids are listening to me. But with that, I'll just go, well, it's probably higher than that, so mind what you're saying, Costa, and make sure that it makes sense, right? So it is higher stakes, so thank you for being here with me. What you see in front of you here is data that we collected in December 2021, and it says 2022 there because that's when we started to engage with it in January 2022. There's a number of indicators, as everyone can be aware. I don't know if the breadth at which people have engaged with the Our School process, but there's great feedback that can be garnered. And the one that we're looking at today is cultural awareness, both the cultural awareness of our students that within their own culture, and then cultural awareness of others. And you'll see why we want to engage with this in a moment. So here's the actual data that we received in December 2021. And if you're like me, you kind of notice a big discrepancy here. So if you look on the top right there, the cultural awareness of our students within their own culture, they're identifying that, and I should qualify what this means. So it means students who have an understanding of the belief, attitudes, and behaviors of their own cultures. Only 49% of our students indicate that they have an understanding of that, right? And that's quite low. However, when we look at students who have an understanding of the belief and attitudes and behaviors of those from other cultures, they're going, yeah, 81% of us, we know about all kinds of other cultures. That is a big gap, right? That's a big discrepancy there. So we wanted to delve into this. And what I hope to do today is to show you how we did that by looking at what we were doing, what we are doing now, and going through some of the results here. And as I said, right, this is just one way that we've been doing it at Greenwood. Okay. So what was observed with this data, right? And when I say what did we consider, this is a small group of advisors and our director of Equity, Inclusion, and Outreach, and myself. We're looking at some things, and we tried to identify, right? So the first thing I've already mentioned, there's a large discrepancy between the perceptions, understanding of other cultures when compared to their own culture, okay? We asked a couple questions after this. Why is this occurring, So what we did do was we started to brainstorm, Do our students actually see their identified culture represented in the work that we're doing in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And this is challenging too for us I'll get into this later. Challenging, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. And then the other question is, do our students recognize when work is done that actually does relate to their culture? So are they able to identify when this stuff is happening? And the third question, do students have a deep understanding of their own culture? And how can we sort of help them if they don't? The third question, and I really bolded the words, what can we try to do? I mean, as Terry Fox says, right? Dreams come true when people try. So we need to try. And what can we try to do to help students understand who they are more effectively? So in other words, how does this information help us inform our actions forward? So what? What's next, right? How do we get closer to that vision of ours of culturally competent students when they leave our school? Okay. Not exactly sure where I'm pointing this sometimes. Over there. Thank you. Awesome. So we looked at what we were doing with our DEI program, and this graphic here is from a model it's a little bit dated, but we've engaged with it in a number of ways, and it's a modified version of this, and it comes from the process of it's a process model of intercultural competence from Dearden in 2006. So like I said, it's a dated model, but we've been what we think is quite innovative with it throughout the years. So what we were doing, there's our vision listed on the top, to create culturally competent individuals upon leaving Greenwood. And when I say we're, this is when we came back essentially into the building after COVID, being online for a little bit of time. So 2020 to 2021. There's a few words within this model that we wanted to kind of point out that we really latched onto, right? So in the first step here, when we're trying to create these culturally competent individuals, the word respect, openness, curiosity, and discovery are things that we really thought were paramount in terms of approaching this, right? And then you see, like, when you're working with an individual, you move to this next session of knowledge and comprehension, okay? And then what we really like there is cultural self-awareness, deep cultural knowledge, and so on. And then you move to this internal outcome, right? And what we really loved there was the ethno-relative view, okay? So we thought, yeah, let's work with this. Let's see what we can do. Let's engage with this model and hope that there's some real growth and some change for students. So what was happening is that there are focused lessons being created by our DEI committee, and our DEI committee consists of students as well as staff. And what they're doing is creating sessions around days of significance, around theme weeks, various other important events that refer to different cultural aspects at our school, okay, and in our society. Those are delivered through our advisor program, and at Greenwood there are 10 to 15 students who are assigned an advisor throughout the school, and they meet several times a week. So we have these, in essence, these mini lessons being created, right? Content is delivered that usually refers to information, historical significance, teaching about other cultures. A great example, Orange Shirt Day is one where we're teaching about why that's happening, and then there's a discussion afterwards that sort of occurs, right, within that small group. And those small groups we thought was the best way to approach this, because there is quite a bit of trust built within the relationship of the advisor and our students, and so we perceive that to be the safest place for students to engage in a really authentic and meaningful way. If I'm being honest, what we found and what we student feedback from this is this approach actually felt to be a little bit performative, and so we heard that feedback in 2021 and in 2020, and we're like, all right, so thank you, that is a gap, right? And you've helped us think about how we can move the needle forward towards a better system, okay? So what did we do with this? Okay, so there's, in spring of 2021, moving forward into 2022, we met with a variety of people, staff, students, varying ages, and we posed some questions around the results here, around this gap. Okay, so one of the questions there, very simply put, why do you think that this discrepancy exists? So we have this statistical data, but now we're also trying to collect some anecdotal data from students as well as from staff. And then the second question we asked in these groups, and we met several times, was, what ideas do we have that we can generate to try and improve our results and our students' understanding of their own culture? And so this is where our students identified that it feels a bit performative to do it this way. But was also really telling to us is that students at our school, and we're very aware of this, is a challenge for us, right? Our population is quite homogeneous visibly, right? And so students said, we don't have a ton of cultural difference in our experiences, and so that's a challenge for us to engage, and that's a very authentic piece of feedback, and we are working really hard to close that gap. The other piece of information they gave us was, we know we have experiences as students. We know we do. We really struggle with being able to relate the understanding of their own cultural identity with what's being taught. How does my experience connect, and is my experience even cultural in any way, right? So there's some deep thought happening there, and it was really interesting to hear students talk about that. When we met with staff, a couple of things came up. Again, the point around our population demographic being quite visibly homogeneous. Not to say it's completely homogeneous, but again, we're vastly a white population, and we're working to improve that. But what staff also indicated to us was that they don't necessarily always feel qualified or knowledgeable enough to approach different cultural aspects, different cultural situations that occur in real time. They're not necessarily equipped to manage the questions that come forward, right? And that's a challenge too, and that's a gap that we can work on. So, where did we go? Looking back to our model, we did some reflective work, and we thought about this again. And essentially, what we thought was, okay, this was our answer to question 2 and 3 from the previous slide. And question 2, in essence, was, what's occurring at our school? And question 3 was, what can we try to do to help fix this, or move the needle towards a better solution? So when we looked at this model that we've been sort of creative with, we really latched onto the ethno-relative view and the empathy piece. Okay, so, what we did essentially moving in towards this year and the end of last year was we switched these 2 steps. Okay, so the internal outcome was a way that we started to frame the lessons. Okay, so a way that we started to approach these very potentially charged situations and issues differently, right? So what we really tried to do, again, was focus, some lessons with our DEI committee, both staff and students, and the themes there that were presented were no longer around the historical significance, no longer around the informational pieces, but rather positionality and intersectionality. So the first 2 there were our first sort of step towards that vision being met. And the next 3, anti-racism, anti-oppression, and social justice, that's next for us. That's where we're going to next, right? So this year, we've really been focusing on students' positionality and intersectionality, and that's a way that we've been able to kind of approach students despite a visible cultural difference at our school. Every individual can value their experience, can value their positionality, and learn about their intersectionality in order to approach a situation differently and be able to engage with it in a personal way, right? Again, that connection with their own culture was what was the gap, where the gap was, right? So we're trying to close that, okay? The other thing that we wanted to really do, you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? So we had this system. We didn't want to be too reactive and throw the entire thing out, right? So we know that 1 year of data is not necessarily 5 years of data and can't necessarily qualify as a trend. So we wanted to make a bit of a nudge here in a direction that we could continue to try to work within the system that we're using, but also shift it, okay? So what does this look like at Greenwood this year? All right, so like we said, it's still running through the same sort of system, right? With our advisors, we have these lessons, this approach, and the lessons very much work on that positionality, intersectionality piece, right? So the small group teacher-led discussions, collaborative mini lessons are created, comprised of staff and students. We did hear staff, right? So staff did say, we don't necessarily feel comfortable, not everyone. So what we've done is we've partnered staff, so now in these sessions, there are 2 staff in each one, and there's a level that they've indicated of at least somewhat expertise, right? So, we talk about this often, the way that, as I mentioned earlier, Rachel Brownell-Swain, the way that she would present one of these mini lessons, very different than one of our grade 7 math teachers, who is a first-year teacher, right? And that's not a comment against that teacher. That's simply speaking to the range of experiences, the depth of knowledge, the way that we can navigate difficult conversations. And that takes experience, it takes time, that's a skill set to build, right? So by partnering a staff who believes that they have some knowledge and some savvy in this form, we're helping to train our staff to feel more comfortable in these situations too, and be able to address situations in the moment when they come up, which is really important to do, Yeah. So again, I just wanted to point out too, the definitions here of positionality as well as intersectionality, they're listed there just in case people were not necessarily aware of what those were. And then our goal, again, through this method, we're trying to have students understand what they bring from their own past experiences, their culture, their set of beliefs into the learning environment in the hopes of developing that cultural competence. Okay. Further, to continue to close these gaps, again, we heard staff. What we've done is we've worked to kind of create some training for staffs, right? So there's a third-party provider we've partnered with, Lunaria is what they're called, and there are 8 self-paced units. Each one has 3 to 4 working modules within. They look at things like terminology, introductory concepts, making the invisible visible is what I like to call it. There are scenarios to help critically think through some somewhat difficult conversations that may have to happen. And those 8 units, those 8 modules are listed there as biases, allyship, race and racism, gender, sexuality, disabilities, ableism, religion and religious discrimination, anti-Asian racism, appropriation versus appreciation. So what we've committed to before the March break is, every staff is going to have worked through the 5th one. And what this looks like at Greenwood in terms of our staff PD is we've had 3 different sessions throughout the year that are half hour, where staff can sit down in small groups, depending on where they are through this training, and discuss, and begin to think about this in a really direct way so they can grapple with the issues and identify gaps within themselves. Okay. So when we looked again at the information this year, for 22 and 23, we put the same survey out as last year. We had fewer students, just being transparent, fewer students respond to the survey this year than last year. We did have an event at the school that sort of took some attention away from that, like the day before it was released. So still very significant numbers, but this again is what we're looking at: cultural awareness of others and cultural awareness of our own culture, that is. Okay, so here we are this year. The cultural awareness of others, as you can see in the top there, was 81 last year, 79 this year, so very similar, right? But I still wanted to point out that I do believe this is a success for us. There's at least some acknowledgement from students that, oh my gosh, I don't actually know as much about other cultures as I believed that I did, right? And so there is a nudge of the needle there, and that's something that we're proud of, even though it is 2%, right? It is something, and that's what we're working to do. We're pointing our feet in the right direction, and we're baby stepping there. Okay. What we are quite proud of is this, right? This is directly measurable from March of last year up until November of this year when we did the survey again. And we've taken this new approach towards positionality as well as intersectionality. There's been a 9% increase in students understanding their own culture, right? And that is significant, and I'm very aware, there are cofactors that go into this. But I have to say, I think that this is a success for us. And I think that the way that we have engaged with our programming has helped with that, right? So this is just a snapshot of all of our grades here. So you'll see that what you have to do when you look at the data here is that in 2021 there's the light bar behind, but there's the dark bar in front from 2022. So you kind of have to compare, the grade 9s from 2022 and the grade 8 from 2021, right? So you'll see that almost every grade has increased with the exception of 2. The grade 11 males are slightly decreased, and grade 12 females they're showing a significant decrease there. Now, I do want to say we are going to look into that gap as well, but I know that our grade 12s, historically, very few of them engage in the survey, and that's something we're working on too. So there may be another cofactor there, but again, it's information and across the board. This isn't something where all of our grade 9s are now experiencing 100% of yes, my own cultural competence is amazing. This is something that shifted the needle across all of our grade 7 to grade 12s. So we're proud of that again.
I'm supposed to look at the grade
Yeah, let me go back here. There we go. That's right, yeah. So I want to bring the microphone with me, but I'll just speak louder. So what I mean essentially is, like, if you're looking at the grade 10 males from this year, we look at grade 9 males from last year, that's sort of the comparison point. Right? Yeah. So hey, that was a significant increase, right? So yes. Again, like I mentioned, the grade 11 males, a bit of a decrease here. So here's from their score of 58 last year, slightly below, but similar. Our grade 12 females, however, much lower, right? And that's something we need to explore, right?
The sevens are new.
Correct. Yes. So the sevens they're a bit of outliers there, right? So we'll have that data point next year, you know. Whoop, now I pressed it twice. Okay. So all this is to say, right, like the way I framed this presentation when we started, right, is this is not the way to do things, it's a way to do things. And it says right here, you know, we know that there's still a long way to go. But even in the 6 months of working on this, from the time we collected this data, there has been growth, you know, and that's something we should be proud of. So I guess if there's anything to take away from this messaging here is we need to know the systems that are happening in our schools. We need to know the programming that we're delivering. We need to be intentional about the way we're doing it. And what's worked at Greenwood may not work at your schools, at your districts. But, you know, like I said before, Terry Fox, right? All we can do is try. Dreams come true when people try, right? So that's our great work, you know. We may have to make adjustments next year, but that's something we're willing to do. And I think if I could use Dr. Williams' word, like that's the catalyst in us, right? We need to be able to shift what we're doing and be nimble, right? So that was one way that we engaged with these results. Okay, so I wanted to just briefly overview that there's many, many ways that we are engaging with the results. That's just one example. And so what we've done here with our staff this year is the same sort of thing, right? In one of our PD sessions, we have staff sit down in small groups and I curate the results. And it's very similar to what I just went through with you. There's the bar graphs where we can take a look and simply ask questions and think a little more deeply. So, you know, we ask these two questions, right? And essentially it's where do we go from here, right? But upon looking through the results, which ones stand out to you based on the grades of students you work with? Why? Based on what you've listed on the previous question, what specific actions can you take on a day-to-day basis in your classrooms, in the hallways that will help, as I said before, push that needle and take that next baby step, right? This next slide is kind of irrelevant, but all I really wanted to show with this is that there's a larger link here with staff feedback around this session, but I've taken some examples out to show on the next slide. All right, so this is moving away from that cultural piece and actually looking at all of the data. And so you'll see there's some feedback here that's responsive to anecdotal feedback from students as well as some of the more observed statistical data, right? So I just wanted to point to one of them because there's quite a bit to read here, but you know, again, stepping away from the mic, this one here came from a comment from a student who said, you know, I feel like sometimes we get coddled a little bit. And so one of our teachers, I have not changed anything, right? This is direct thought, right? And it's a very poignant thought, I thought, right? So I want to call the students less and have high expectations. Perhaps I can have less and more relevant AOLs. Is the workload contributing to high anxiety and depression, which is something we also noted. Again, thank you, Dr. Williams, for setting that up so well. And I love this. I should find out more about this, right? That's the teacher saying in my classroom, I should work to find out more about this anxiety and depression. Why is that the case? Do students feel high levels of anxiety? High levels of burnout? Do they feel like they're on a conveyor belt? More information is needed, essentially, right? So, and that's an individual teacher. Microphone. So we are encouraging teachers to think about this on a day-to-day basis and intentionally put systems and structures in place to their lessons to try to help address these things, There's another one on there, particularly around, maybe I didn't choose that one, sorry. But there's another piece of data showed us that, like, in terms of anxiety and depression, it is more prevalent in our female population across the school, right? So one of the comments not included there was like, I do need to check in more with the female students in my class, right? And it's there, thank you, right? So like those thoughts are happening, and all I'm saying is that those things are inspiring, right? It's nice to know that we are working with people who deeply care and are willing to make change. And I think that's more valuable than a lot of things, right? And this is all due to the feedback we're receiving from these student surveys. I wasn't sure if we would have time for this, but I thought maybe we could run through one of these, and inspire you to actually think a little bit about it, the same way that we've been doing with our staff too. So as you can see, right, on my slide, on my notes here, it says your turn. We've got the 2 questions here that we pose to our staff. And I just simply like to show you, some data that we've collected this year. And I encourage you to kind of think about steps. If this was data in your school, what might you do? Talk to the person next to you. What kind of things could you do to kind of nudge the needle forward in a positive direction? So here they are, and it's in and around our different topic, right? Not the cultural awareness piece, but this year it is like around bullying and exclusion, and that sense of belonging is something that I work very hard on at our school. And so, this is something that we put forward to staff, and they've begun to think, but when I first looked at this, there were a couple of things that made me go, whoa. And so I would just encourage you to take a few minutes here on your own. Take a look and think, what might you do? Again, those questions. Upon looking through the results, which ones stand out to you based on the grades you might work with? And then based on what you've listed, what are some things you might be able to do to help nudge that moving forward? So, yeah.
Just for context, the graph, is that self-identifying that they've been bullied?
That's right, yeah.
In the school, at any point in the school year, or on a consistent,
Yeah.
What was the, do you remember the question that was asked?
There are a set of questions that go into this data, so that's a good question. Our staff ask that all the time. So,
but essentially, it's students
self-identifying.
Bullied.
That's right. Yeah. So or if I experienced 4 minutes, you got it. So
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
Questions framed within the past 4 weeks.
Within the
Okay. Yeah. So and there are no. I was like 4 minutes now. All right, we're going by the minute. We got it. Yeah. So there are a number of questions that go into this category, I believe, too. Right. So within the last 4 weeks or so. Right. So, yeah. I'll stop talking.
Was there a question about the frequency, or just having been bullied? Could it be one, or could it be 10 times the same? Right?
That's a good question. I don't recall if there was a frequency or if it was an experience. But the way that I view that is one time is too many. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So.
It's kind of a scale. I think it was like more than once.
Yeah.
If I recall, if you witnessed bullying.
That's right.
Like,
Yeah.
I think it was just the question included if you witnessed it
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. There were a few different qualifiers there, right? Yeah.
Any other questions?
Sorry, just a question. Is outside on school property, you're still thinking about physical, in-person, not cyber?
I believe it's either.
Okay.
Yeah. So across any sort of bullying type of behavior that a student identifies, right? And that also, like, I'm aware too, right? Like, there is bullying-like behavior and there is bullying, right? So that's something that I work with students with as well, right? I'll share because I'm here, like the one for me that really stood out, not that there's a number, but like in the classrooms, is where students felt like this was happening. 14% is pretty significant, right? So that was very surprising to our staff, and a very deliberate sort of like, okay, there's a moment here where we need to have some direct intervention with things that we may not be seeing right in front of our eyes, you know. Okay, good. I encourage you to keep thinking about it if you want to, but I know that we got the 5-minute call a little bit ago. And you know, I thank you very much for hearing me. I know it's a long way some people have come, and time is so precious, so thank you for that. You know, in the spirit of my own growth and continuing to close my gaps, if you do have any feedback for me, I'm very grateful for these QR codes. Didn't know you'd have those, so thanks. But if you do want to speak to me at any time, like, please reach out. I'm often better one-on-one than I am in these large group situations. But my email is there, so I'm welcome the feedback and welcome any questions. And I'll do what I can to help you. Okay? Thank you.